While people may place their hope in mighty warriors, God so often chooses to act through those whose hearts are simply open and willing to be used by Him. If you are willing, God will use you, and the outcome will be more than you could ever imagine.
Welcome to Mission 66, your ultimate journey through all 66 books of the Bible, brought to you by Bible teacher and pastor Dr. Louis Sayao in partnership with Transworld Radio. Today, we explore the book of Judges, stories of courage, God's faithfulness, and the consequences of turning from Him. Let's hear from our teacher, John Matthews, and co-host Esther Sisulu.
Today we are in the book of Judges, chapters 4 and 5, and here we'll find out that God uses both men and women, despite their shortcomings, despite their imperfections, to fulfill His perfect will. Now we're going to spotlight the prophetess Deborah and a brave woman named Jael. And our teacher, John Matthews, will present today's theme, Victory with the Feminine Touch.
Well, that sounds like a good episode, doesn't it?
I mean,
straight from the off.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
and
the sound of that.
I mean, it's a feminine touch that we're going to see in these pages, John.
Yeah. And that is good. Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, you know what? We read a lot about some impactful men in the scriptures.
Yeah.
And I think today it's going to be lovely to see how God uses women in His perfect plan of salvation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Really is. And this is going to be a good one. So a very warm welcome to Mission 66. Great to be with you wherever you're joining us from today. And here we are with the people of Israel having reached the promised land. And now we've entered what is known as the period of the Judges, which is actually the name of this seventh book in the Bible. Now this period, well, it lasted 325 years in Israel's history, immediately after Joshua's conquest of the land of Canaan. So Israel had taken the land promised them by God, but they still hadn't completely obeyed God's orders. And so they didn't really have a firm national unity established. There was no king over them. There was no such thing at this stage, and no authority figure then over the nation. So things were a little chaotic, and each person really doing whatever seemed best to them at the time. Now, last episode, we pointed out that there was a cycle, a negative cycle that had impacted and was affecting the entire nation. And this is what it was. First, they go into disobedience, which results in them being disciplined by God, who then raises up adversaries to oppress them. Then they find themselves in this situation, and so they repent and they call on God for help. Then God takes pity on them and raises somebody up, one person, as an empowered leader, called a judge, to deliver the people from their oppressors. And then when things just ease off again and, okay, we're back into some kind of normality, well, then they fall back into disobedience, and that cycle repeats itself all over again. So last time we learned about the first three of those judges. Othniel was his name. He was the nephew of Caleb. Then there was Ehud, who is described as the left-handed man. And then Shamgar, whose primary weapon was an ox goad. And so we reach chapter 4, and once again we are in this very cycle that I've just described, and it just kept repeating itself time after time after time. Israel sins, suffers oppression by the Baal worshippers. That's where we're at in chapter 4, so let's read. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord after Ehud died. And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim. And then the people of Israel, well, they cried out to the Lord for help, for he had 900 chariots of iron, and he oppressed the people of Israel cruelly for 20 years. Now, in a previous episode, we discussed, didn't we, how the Canaanites had learned how to make iron weaponry, and that gave them military superiority over the Israelites. And up until this point, the judges of Israel had all been men. But now we're going to read about a very special lady from verse 4. And this is what it says. Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at this time. She used to sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And the people of Israel came up to her for judgment. And she sent and summoned Barak, the son of Abinoam, from Kedesh Naphtali. And she said to him, Has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you, Go, gather your men at Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 from the people of Naphtali and the people of Zebulun, and I will draw out Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, to meet you by the river Kishon with his chariots and his troops, and I will give him into your hand. So here we're introduced to this leader. His name is Barak, who's reluctant to carry God's mission out. We'll see in this chapter then that when the men don't take their rightful place, the women step in to do it. This is verse 8. Barak said to her, If you'll go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. And Deborah said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Then Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kedesh. And Barak called out Zebulun and Naphtali to Kedesh. And 10,000 men went up at his heels, and Deborah went up with him. And next we're introduced to a man called Heber, who was married to a feisty woman called Jael. Remember that name because we're going to hear more about her pretty soon. This is verse 11. Now Heber, the Kenite, had separated from the Kenites, the descendants of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tent as far away as the oak in Zananim, which is near Kadesh. And when Sisera was told that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera called out all his chariots, 900 chariots of iron, and all the men who were with him, from Harosheth Hagoyim to the river Kishon. And Deborah said to Barak, Up, for this is the day in which the Lord has given Sisera into your hand. Does not the Lord go out before you? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. And the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army before Barak by the edge of the sword. And Sisera got down from his chariot and fled on foot. And Barak pursued the chariots and the army to Harosheth Hagoyim, and all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not a man was left. And now, as we reach verse 17, we hear about Jael. But Sisera fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between Jabin, the king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. And Jael came out to meet Sisera, and she said to him, Turn aside, my lord, turn aside to me, do not be afraid. So he turned aside to her in the tent, and she covered him with a rug. And he said to her, Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty. So she opened a skin of milk and gave him a drink, and covered him. And he said to her, Stand at the opening of the tent, and if any man comes and asks you, Is anyone here? Say no. But Jael, the wife of Heber, took a tent peg, and took a hammer in her hand. Then she went softly to him, and drove the peg into his temple, until it went down into the ground while he was lying fast asleep from weariness. So he died. And behold, as Barak was pursuing Sisera, Jael went out to meet him and said to him, "Come, and I will show you the man whom you are seeking." So he went to her tent, and there lay Sisera, dead, with a tent peg in his temple. So on that day God subdued Jabin the king of Canaan before the people of Israel, and the hand of the people of Israel pressed harder and harder against Jabin the king of Canaan until they destroyed Jabin, king of Canaan. Now, culturally, it would have been unacceptable for Sisera, or indeed any man, to enter a woman's tent, but because of that, it made it the perfect hiding place, because nobody would have thought to look for him there. But he certainly didn't expect what happened to him. So yes, Barak did his part, it can't be denied, but I'm sure you'd agree that the real heroes of this account are Deborah, without whose encouragement no victory would have been attempted, and then Jael, the woman who had the resolve and the courage to finish the job off effectively by driving that tent peg through the skull of Sisera.
And this is Mission 66, and we are exploring the pages of Judges 4 and 5. Well, I'm Esther, your host, and I'm here to ask some of the burning questions that we have with a bit of a feminine touch, as what we're looking at today are two very impactful women in the scriptures who, in essence, got the job done. But John, before we even get into any of that, I think it's best if we go ahead and move to chapter 5, which is the Song of Victory after Israel got free from the oppression of Sisera's army. Let's talk about that a bit.
Yeah, good call, Esther. Let's do that. So Judges 5, the Song of Deborah and Barak. Now, this ancient song commemorates the triumph, much as Miriam's song actually did in Exodus 15 after the Israelites had crossed the Red Sea. But here, evidently, Deborah was willing to share the honours with Barak in leading this song, which is both celebratory but also instructive. So let's read it from verse 1. It says, "Then sang Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, on that day." And this is what they sang. "That the leaders took the lead in Israel, that the people offered themselves willingly. Bless the Lord. Hear, O kings, give ear, O princes. To the Lord I will sing. I will make melody to the Lord, the God of Israel. Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled and the heavens dropped. Yes, the clouds dropped water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, even Sinai before the Lord, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were abandoned, and travellers kept to the byways. The villages ceased in Israel. They ceased to be until I arose. I, Deborah, arose as a mother in Israel. When new gods were chosen, when war was in the gates, was shield or spear to be seen amongst 40,000 in Israel? My heart goes out to the commanders of Israel, who offered themselves willingly among the people. Bless the Lord. Tell of it, you who ride on white donkeys, you who sit on rich carpets, and you who walk by the way. To the sound of musicians at the watering places, there they repeat the righteous triumphs of the Lord, the righteous triumphs of his villagers in Israel. And so it goes on this way, Deborah and Barak doing this musical duet, singing about how the people banded together against their oppressors. But it's interesting that down in verse 15, they begin then to chide and rebuke the tribes who refused to take part in this battle, saying, or singing rather, Among the clans of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. Why did you sit still among the sheepfolds to hear the whistling for the flocks? Among the clans of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan. And Dan, why did he stay with the ships? Asher sat still at the coast of the sea, staying by his landings. So there's a sense of, why Reuben, Gilead and Dan? Why didn't you get involved? But then they give a hearty congratulations to the tribes who did take part. Verse 18, Zebulun is a people who risked their lives to the death. Naphtali too, on the heights of the field. The kings came, they fought. Then fought the kings of Canaan at Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo. They got no spoils of silver. From heaven the stars fought. From their courses they fought against Sisera. So in this song, Deborah is singing, and what she's saying is that it seems that the very powers of heaven were fighting on behalf of Israel, as they had done in days gone by. And then she pauses to rebuke another group who offered no help, and she doesn't mince her words here. Curse Meroz, says the angel of the Lord. Curse its inhabitants thoroughly, because they did not come to the help of the Lord, against the mighty. But then Deborah gives full honour to the lady who killed Sisera. Most blessed of women be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, of tent-dwelling women most blessed. He asked for water, and she gave him milk. She brought him curds in a noble's bowl. She sent her hand to the tent peg, and her right hand to the workman's mallet. She struck Sisera. She crushed his head. She shattered and pierced his temple. Between her feet he sank, he fell. He lay still. Between her feet he sank, he fell. Where he sank, there he fell, dead. And at the end of chapter 5, it notes what happened after that act of faith and courage, and the land had rest for 40 years.
That is a fascinating read.
No.
What a song.
Yeah, what a song.
And I suppose I'm going to ask you a few questions about that in just a moment.
Okie doke.
So, John, what I do want to know right now, though, is, Israel was displacing the Canaanite people for the most part, but it actually seems here that many of Israel's enemies, at least in the times of the judges, came from outside of Canaan, not so much from within Canaan itself. Is that a fair assessment to make?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it's a good spot. It really is. And so sometimes the Israelites were hard pressed on every side, and sometimes it's a bit like that in our walk of faith, isn't it? Yeah, you're right. And what we'll see later on is that invaders, came from further north in what we would know as modern day Turkey, and from the north and the east, from places like Assyria and Babylon as well.
Great. Okay. Well, let's look at Deborah, who
yeah.
in the scriptures, in the Bible, is introduced as a prophetess. She's the wife of Lapidoth. And yet we don't actually hear anything about Lapidoth during any of this. He's not featured at all. Where was he? I mean, I thought that the men were supposed to be doing the leading in this case.
Yeah, good question. Ancient Israelite society was patriarchal, so there was this strong male-dominated perspective. So you might have thought, given that Lapidoth would have been the prophet, but no, it was his wife who was the leader of Israel at the time. She was the appointed one, the one with the wisdom and the authority that was given to her to settle disputes. So she was the one who was able to just cut through with her wisdom and her courage and her advice. And, other prophetesses appear in the Old Testament. So there was never a restriction against the idea of women possessing spiritual sensitivity and indeed in leading and just conveying the messages from God, and that's exactly what we're seeing here.
And I have to say, as a woman who reads the scriptures, it's so inspiring to see how God has used this very talented woman with gifts and talents to lead the people to God's glory.
Do you think it's more talent, or do you think it's more just a willing heart? I often look at the Bible and see the people that God uses and take encouragement that that he uses. I suppose, like I think of Moses, who said, "Lord, I'm sort of slow of tongue and I mumble my words," and then he uses others who say, "Lord, don't use me," but he says, "No, I'm using you."
Sure.
What do you think?
Yeah, you know what? I agree with you 1,000% in that it is a willing heart.
That's a high percentage.
Yeah, 1,000. Okay,
that's like, I'm with you, brother.
all the way.
Yeah.
He uses that willing heart that they have, and I think it's also an anointing that he places on them.
Yes.
But perhaps there's some talent to it as well, because in Deborah's case, she's a strong leader, and I want us to delve a little deeper into Deborah's leadership. Why do you think that she was qualified to be a spiritual leader during this particular moment in Israel's history?
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point, because there's something innate in her, isn't there? There's that something that's like, she's got, I said cut through, wasn't it? But those who perhaps sees and is able to make decisions that others aren't. So thank you for the question. Let's consider the broader context, because we said, didn't we, that leadership in the Old Testament was predominantly male to this point, in fact, and that was due to cultural and societal norms. So it's true that Deborah's calling does stand out, and I think the first thing to highlight is that God's Spirit was enabling her to be a prophetess, and what more than that, a counselor as well. And to put that another way, God chooses Deborah in a way that he didn't choose her husband, or didn't use her husband. So here we find Deborah fulfilling a prophetic ministry. And here we find Jael finishing the job off, driving the tent peg through Sisera's head. At the same time, the text there's an element of irony here, suggesting that the men weren't fulfilling their responsibilities. That is evident in Barak's hesitancy to do what he was called to do. And so, where he was hesitant, Deborah wasn't. And so she comes into the picture, and she's the one who takes the lead. Without these two, this battle isn't happening, nor is it being won.
You know what? And I want us to get even further to that point, John, because Barak's leadership here was sort of, I suppose you can say, in name only, right? He had the title, he had the authority, but not the will to fulfill what was called to do. He didn't do his duty. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and one that's been debated and maybe misunderstood over the years, I think, through church history. The bottom line is, as we look at the Bible and we look at those people who are used of God, that God uses hearts that are open to be used by him. That's what he looks for, where his Holy Spirit can be enabled, where his Holy Spirit, where he sees that heart, that verse in the Bible that says his eyes roam to and fro the earth, looking for those whose hearts are fully committed to him. It doesn't say whose women's hearts who are fully committed to him, or men's hearts. It's just whose hearts are committed to him. So men and women can both be used for his glory. I think of that passage in Romans 2, it's verse 11, that says God does not show favoritism. That's not his character at all. And, some scholars, Esther, even suggest that this story reflects an earlier period in Israel's history when women may well have had a more prominent role in society than perhaps they do when we're here at the time of the judges.
Okay, and I'm thankful that you've brought that point, and you've emphasized the fact that God sees us all, and if our hearts are willing, regardless of who you are, what your background is, he will use you because your heart is submitted to him. I love that.
Well, in truth, you helped me get there. So
it's a collaborative effort.
I can't take too much.
Well, let's have a look at
credit for that.
Jael.
Yeah.
Okay, because she also played a very interesting role in Israel's victory here. So the army was successful in winning the battle, but she kind of had that finishing touch by getting rid of the the enemy general.
Yeah.
So, she used her feminine touch, but she drove that peg into the side of his face. So let's talk about her influence in this regard.
Yeah, and maybe, look, feminine touch would be better apportioned to Deborah's presence in this narrative, because Jael's actions, as you say, I mean, her touch on Sisera's head was certainly a decisive one, and it would have taken sort of some not only strength of will, but just awareness of the situation to do what she did, especially because evidently her husband Heber was on friendly terms with Jabin, the king of Hazor, but she was pretty decisive when the moment came. And the passage that we've just read actually emphasizes that. It emphasizes how brave that she was. Sisera, well, he was the commander of a really oppressive army. And here's Jael showing this extraordinary courage and determination. She invites him in, offers him milk, waits for him to fall asleep, and then she's pretty decisive.
Yep.
So look, the method may appear and read as pretty barbaric, but in the context of what we're looking at, again, it was necessary, even though it would have been a really, really tough thing to do. Let's make no bones about that. This is not an easy thing to do at all. But she did put the final touch to what was a decisive victory against an oppressor who had tormented Israel for 20 years.
Yeah, she did. She did. Yeah, she really did, John. She made a decisive decision. Well, look, this has been a fascinating look at chapters 4 and 5 of Judges. So let's go ahead and summarize today's episode.
Yeah, well, our theme in Judges chapters 4 and 5 was victory with a feminine touch, focusing on Deborah and Jael. Now, Deborah was a prophetess and was the fourth judge of Israel. And during this, I think what can only be described as a tumultuous period in Israel's history, Deborah it is who calls Barak to lead an army against Sisera, the commander of Jabin's oppressive Canaanite force who had dominated Israel for some 20 years. And Barak, well, he hesitates. And so Deborah takes the lead. And as she does so, she predicts that the ultimate victory was going to come through a woman. And so it did. Jael kills Sisera, and she drives a tent peg through his temple as he sleeps in her tent, and that secures Israel's victory against Jabin. And then chapter 5 celebrates this triumph through the Song of Deborah, which is a poetic hymn praising God's intervention and the courage of Deborah and Jael. And so to sum up, when people may well place their hope in mighty warriors, God chooses to act so often through those whose hearts are simply open and willing to be used by Him. So as you listen to Mission 66 today, if you are willing, God will use you, and the outcome will be more than you could ever imagine.
Appreciate that word of encouragement, John, especially as we wrap up today's episode of Mission 66. And we hope that you'll join us next time as we continue to take on more chapters from the book of Judges. I'm Esther for John and our team saying thank you for listening to Mission 66.
Let me remind you to head on over to mission66.org to download your study guide. It's free. Dive deeper into the Bible teaching of John Matthews and learn how it all relates to your Christian walk. Tag along with John and Esther on our Bible road trip episode by episode. Your study guide's waiting for you at mission66.org. That's where you can also post your questions or make a comment, and even help out with a donation to keep Mission 66's heart beating around the world. Hop on over to mission66.org. Mission 66 is a partnership of TWR and the ministry of Dr. Luis Sayao.